Disclaimer: this story is a work of fiction created for entertainment purposes only. While it draws inspiration from real-life emotions and situations, all characters, names, places, and events are either products of the author's imagination or used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. The themes explored may involve complex relationships and moral dilemmas, but they are portrayed respectfully and within the boundaries of appropriate content. Viewer discretion is advised. It began on one of those gray, overcast mornings where the world seemed quieter than usual. I was sitting at my kitchen table, cradling a lukewarm mug of coffee I hadn't bothered to reheat, staring at a blank wall as if the plaster could answer all the questions weighing on me. My marriage had been on shaky ground for months, maybe years if I was honest. We'd become polite strangers under the same roof, exchanging small talk like neighbors rather than soulmates. My days blurred into one another, filled with work emails, grocery lists, and the faint ache of something missing. It was in that state of emotional drift that I found myself leaning on a friendship I never expected to matter so much. He was just there, always there, in the kind of way you don't notice until one day you realize you've started depending on it. We met at work. At first, our interactions were the sort you forget as soon as they happen. Brief exchanges over the coffee machine, polite nods in the hallway, the occasional, "How's your day?" But slowly, without my noticing, those moments started to stretch. A few extra minutes talking about weekend plans turned into 15 minutes laughing over shared frustrations with the boss. It felt safe, harmless, a rare pocket of warmth in an otherwise cold routine. There's something about finding someone who listens, really listens, that can make the world feel less heavy. He had this way of leaning in, like every word I said mattered, even if it was just about the weather or a bad TV show I'd watched the night before. I told myself it was nothing more than friendship. After all, I'd known him long enough to trust that his intentions were good. Besides, I was married, and I believed that was an unshakable boundary. But as the weeks passed, I began to realize I was saving pieces of my day just to share with him. Little stories, thoughts, even small jokes that I knew would make him laugh. I held them in, waiting for that moment when we could talk. It wasn't about romance. At least not yet. It was about the comfort of being understood without judgment, about finding someone who could make the world feel lighter, even if just for a few stolen minutes. If I'm honest, that comfort was addictive. I didn't know it at the time, but it was the beginning of a shift I would never be able to undo. In my mind, it was just a friendship I valued, a lifeline in a life that felt increasingly lonely. But somewhere, deep down, a part of me knew that connections like this don't stay innocent forever. And yet, I didn't pull back. I didn't set up walls. I let myself drift closer, telling myself it was fine, that nothing bad could happen. I didn't realize I was already standing on the edge of a line I swore I'd never cross. It started with small exchanges during lunch breaks, the kind of moments that seem insignificant at the time but, in hindsight, are the beginning of something you can't take back. We talk about work deadlines, annoying coworkers, or weekend plans, and I told myself that was all it was, just friendly chatter. But slowly, the conversations began to stretch into longer, more personal territory. I don't remember when it first happened, but one night I found myself scrolling through my phone in bed, replying to his message at 11:42 p.m., laughing softly so I wouldn't wake my spouse beside me. That night turned into another, and another, until late-night conversations became our unspoken routine. There's something about talking to someone when the rest of the world is asleep. The dark outside makes it feel like the two of you are in your own little universe. I'd tell him about my day, about the way the rain made the streets smell like earth, about the coworker who microwaved fish in the office kitchen, about the little anxieties I carried but didn't feel safe sharing with anyone else. He listened, really listened, and when he replied, his words felt like they wrapped around me like a blanket. And it wasn't just about me. He opened up too. He told me about his lonely apartment, the nights he'd sit in silence because he didn't want to turn on the TV, the family arguments he never talked about at work. We started exchanging more than just surface-level details. We traded fears, hopes, and memories. Tiny fragments of ourselves we didn't share with anyone else. Somewhere in the middle of those quiet, glowing screens, We became more than colleagues. There was a moment I remember vividly. It was just past midnight, and I told him about a recurring dream I'd been having. One where I kept running but never reached the place I was trying to get to. He sent me a message that read, "Maybe you're not lost. Maybe you're just waiting for the right person to walk with you." I stared at that sentence for a long time, my heart beating faster for reasons I didn't want to admit. We started having just one more message nights, where goodbye would stretch into another 20 minutes. Then an hour, until we both knew we'd regret the lack of sleep the next morning. Sometimes the topics were light, movies we wanted to watch, music we loved. Other times, they were so deep they left me staring at the ceiling long after we'd said goodnight. I began to realize I wasn't just telling him things. I was giving him parts of myself. Looking back, that's when the invisible thread between us became impossible to ignore. Late-night conversations have a way of stripping away the masks we wear during the day. They make you honest in a way daylight doesn't allow. I didn't know it yet, but every word we exchanged was drawing us closer to a line neither of us had intended to cross. It happened so subtly that, at first, I convinced myself I'd imagined it. We were sitting across from each other at the small cafe near the office, a place we'd started going to when work felt overwhelming. The air was filled with the warm scent of coffee and cinnamon, and we were laughing about something. Something so small I can't even remember it now. But in the middle of that laughter, he reached across the table to hand me a napkin. His fingers brushed mine. Just a second. Just skin against skin. But something in me paused, like the whole cafe had gone silent. That was the first time I realized this was no longer just comfort. There was an undercurrent, something warm and dangerous humming beneath the surface. I saw it in the way his eyes lingered a fraction too long, in the way his smile shifted from friendly to something softer, almost vulnerable. And yet, neither of us said a word about it. We went back to our coffees, back to the small talk, pretending nothing had changed, even though everything had. The days that followed felt different, heavier with unspoken tension. I caught myself noticing details I shouldn't. How the sleeves of his shirt clung to his forearms, how his voice dropped slightly when he was tired, how his laugh seemed to come easier when it was just the two of us. And when he spoke my name, there was a warmth in it that made my chest ache in a way I couldn't explain. There was one night that sealed it for me. We were on the phone. Yes, the phone now, not just messages, talking about nothing and everything. He was telling me about a song he'd been listening to on repeat, and then he said, almost casually, "I wish you could hear it right now. You'd understand." There was a pause, a silence heavy with everything we weren't saying. I wanted to ask, "Understand what?" But I didn't, because I knew, and he knew I knew. That's the strange thing about these kinds of feelings. They don't need to be spoken aloud to be real. They live in glances, in half-smiles, in the way two people lean just slightly closer than necessary. They live in the shared understanding that something is there, even if you both keep pretending it's not. Of course, guilt began to creep in. I told myself that as long as we didn't say anything, as long as nothing happened, it wasn't wrong. But late at night, lying in bed beside someone who had no idea about the thoughts running through my mind, I knew I was lying to myself. The truth was simple and terrifying. I wanted him, and I was almost certain he wanted me too. We didn't talk about it. We didn't need to. The feeling had taken root, quietly and completely, and there was no turning back. All that was left was to wait for the moment when one of us would finally stop pretending. It was raining that evening, the kind of rain that doesn't just fall but soaks into the air, wrapping the streets in a misty haze. I'd stayed late at the office, and so had he. Most of the building was dark, save for the warm yellow light spilling out from our corner of the floor. The sound of rain tapping against the windows made the world outside feel far away, as if time itself had slowed. We were sitting across from each other, papers spread out between us, pretending to focus on work. But neither of us was really paying attention to spreadsheets or deadlines. The air felt charged, like a storm was brewing inside the room as much as outside. I remember glancing up and catching him watching me. Not with the casual glance of a coworker, but with something deeper, something that made my breath catch. When it was finally time to leave, we realized the rain had turned into a downpour. He offered to walk me to my car with an umbrella, though we both knew the wind would make it useless. The street was nearly empty, the world washed in the glow of streetlights reflecting off puddles. We were both laughing, huddled together under the small umbrella, our shoulders pressed so close there was barely room for air between us. Then it happened. I don't even remember who stopped walking first. One moment we were stepping over a puddle, the next we were standing still, the rain drumming around us. He looked at me in a way that made everything else fade. The cars, the rain, the hum of the city. It wasn't a look that asked for permission. It was a look that said we'd both already decided. He reached up, brushing a strand of wet hair from my face. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. And then, before I could think, before I could stop myself, we were leaning in. The kiss was slow at first, hesitant, as if we both knew we could still pull back. But we didn't. It deepened, the warmth of it clashing with the cold rain, and I felt something inside me break open. Something I couldn't put back together. It wasn't just a kiss. It was crossing a line we'd both sworn we wouldn't. It was the point of no return. We pulled away, breathless, our foreheads resting together. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The silence was heavy with the truth. We couldn't undo what we'd just done. When we finally parted, walking in opposite directions, I knew my life had just split into two timelines. Before that night and after. Everything we'd been before was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous, far more intoxicating. And as I drove home, my lips still tingling from the kiss, one thought echoed in my mind. There was no going back now. The next morning, I woke up with the lingering sensation of last night still clinging to me, like the taste of coffee that won't wash away, no matter how much water you drink. I went through my routine as if on autopilot, brushing my teeth, pouring cereal, pretending to read the morning emails. But beneath the surface, my thoughts replayed the kiss over and over again. Every detail was vivid. The sound of the rain, the warmth of his hands, the way his eyes had held mine as if the rest of the world didn't exist. At work, we acted like nothing had happened. No one else in the office would have noticed a difference, but I did. Every time our eyes met across the room, it was like a private thread of electricity connected us. We didn't talk about the kiss, not directly, but our silences spoke volumes. That's the thing about carrying a secret. It's heavier than you expect. I felt it in the way I hesitated before speaking to my spouse, in the way I chose my words more carefully at dinner, in the moments when I would drift away mid-conversation because my mind had slipped back to him. I was living two lives now, the one everyone could see, and the one I could never admit existed. But along with the guilt came a dangerous craving. That kiss had opened something in me I couldn't close. I'd find myself waiting for chances to see him, inventing reasons to pass by his desk or linger in the hallway. And when we did speak, there was always an unspoken tension, like we were both on the edge of saying something we couldn't take back. One evening, I caught myself checking my phone every few minutes, waiting for his name to light up the screen. When his message finally came, just 3 words, "Are you okay?" My chest tightened. It was a simple question, but I read between the lines. He wasn't just asking about my mood. He was asking about us. We began to communicate in small, coded ways. A shared smile across the room. A quick touch on the shoulder. A joke that no one else would understand. It was enough to keep the connection alive, but it also made it impossible to move on. Each day, I told myself I should stop, that the only way to protect both of us was to pull away completely. And each day, I failed. The hardest part was the constant pretending. Pretending that I wasn't thinking about him when my spouse was speaking. Pretending that the late-night messages were just harmless conversations. Pretending that I hadn't crossed a line I could never uncross. I realized, with a kind of quiet dread, that the secret wasn't going to fade. If anything, it was growing roots, twisting itself into my life so deeply that removing it would tear everything apart. And so I did what people do when they don't want to face the truth. I kept living both lives, hoping one day the longing would fade. But in my heart, I already knew it wouldn't. It didn't happen the way I thought it would. There was no screaming, no confrontation, no dramatic moment of confession. Instead, the end came quietly, almost gently, like a candle slowly burning down to nothing. He called me one afternoon and said we needed to talk. His voice was calm, but there was a weight in it that made my stomach tighten. We met at the same cafe where so much had started, the place where I'd first felt that unspoken shift between us. This time, the air felt different, heavy, final. We talked about work first, about small, safe topics, as if neither of us wanted to step into the real reason we were there. But eventually, the words found their way out. He told me he'd been offered a position in another city, one he couldn't turn down. It was an opportunity he'd been waiting for, and I knew it was the right choice for him. I also knew it meant that whatever this was between us would have to end. I wanted to tell him not to go. I wanted to say that I couldn't imagine my days without those late-night messages, without the way his presence made the air feel lighter. But I didn't, because the truth was, I didn't have the right to ask him to stay. Our connection, as deep as it was, had no safe place in the world we lived in. It existed only in the stolen moments we'd carved out for ourselves, and now those moments were running out. We sat there in silence for a long time, sipping coffee that had gone cold. There was so much I wanted to say, but every sentence I formed in my head felt too dangerous to speak aloud. Instead, I looked at him and tried to memorize everything. His smile, the way his eyes softened when they met mine, the small crease at the corner of his mouth when he was about to laugh. When it was time to leave, we walked out together, our steps slow, as if dragging out the last stretch of time we had. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. He turned to me, and for a moment, I thought he might pull me into his arms. But he didn't. Instead, he gave me a small, sad smile and said, "Take care of yourself." I nodded, unable to trust my voice, and watched him walk away. I didn't call after him. I didn't run to stop him. I just stood there, knowing that this was the last time I would see him. Not just in person, but in the way I had come to know him. There was no dramatic ending, no clear closure. Just two people who had shared something they could never speak of, parting as quietly as they had come together. And though I didn't shed a tear in that moment, I felt the loss settle into me like a shadow that would never leave. Years have passed since that rainy night and the quiet goodbye that followed. Life has moved on, at least on the surface. My days are now filled with routines that no longer hold the same undercurrent of anticipation. I wake up, make breakfast, go to work, come home, and repeat the cycle like clockwork. To anyone looking in from the outside, I am the picture of stability. But stability can be a mask. And behind mine lies a story no one will ever hear. Sometimes, without warning, he slips into my thoughts. It could be something as small as hearing a song we once talked about, or catching the faint scent of coffee and rain on the same afternoon. In those moments, it feels like no time has passed at all, and I'm right back there. Feeling his hand brush mine across a table, hearing the way his voice softened when he spoke to me in the quiet hours of the night. I've asked myself countless times what it really was. Was it love? Or was it just two lonely people finding comfort in each other at the wrong time? The truth shifts depending on the day. Some days, I tell myself it was nothing but a fleeting connection, a chapter that closed before it could truly begin. Other days, I feel the weight of it like a stone in my chest, convinced that it was the most real thing I've ever known. There is guilt, yes, but not in the way people might expect. It's not just about crossing a line I shouldn't have. It's about knowing that a part of me still belongs to someone who is no longer in my life, and never will be again. It's about carrying a memory so sharp and clear that it still has the power to draw tears I won't let fall. I have never told anyone, not my closest friend, not a sibling, not even the pages of a diary. The secret feels safer locked away, untouched by judgment or misunderstanding. I think if I spoke it aloud, it would lose its shape, become something smaller or uglier than what it truly was. And maybe that's why I protect it so fiercely, not because I'm proud of it, but because it's the one piece of my life that is entirely my own. People say that time heals everything. Maybe they're right, but I've learned that time doesn't erase. It simply softens the edges until you can carry the weight without stumbling. I carry this one carefully, tucked deep inside, where it can't be taken from me. And so I go on, living the life I've built, smiling when expected, moving through the motions. But sometimes, In the quiet, I still hear his voice. I still feel the echo of a night when comfort turned into something more, something forbidden. And I know that when my time comes, this will be the one story I take with me to the grave. In the years since, I've learned that some moments never fade. They don't blur with time the way faces and places often do. Instead, they remain etched in your memory like a photograph you've hidden away, one you can't bring yourself to throw out, but also can't display where anyone might see it. That night in the rain is one of those moments. I can still feel the chill in the air, the way my heart pounded like it wanted to escape my chest, the quiet certainty that my life had just changed forever. I've lived a whole life since then, a life of milestones, birthdays, and holidays that came and went as expected. I've smiled in pictures, held conversations, celebrated victories, and grieved losses. To everyone else, I've been exactly who they believed me to be. But beneath the surface, I've been someone else too. The keeper of a secret that no one will ever uncover. It's strange the way a single decision can split your life into a before and after. For me, before was filled with quiet loneliness, the kind you grow accustomed to without even realizing it's there. After was different. It was filled with a fire I didn't know I was capable of feeling, a dangerous warmth that burned too brightly to last. And though I knew it couldn't continue, part of me still longs for the way it made me feel alive. I've thought about what I would say if I ever saw him again. Would we laugh about it? Would we sit in silence? Would we both pretend not to remember? But deep down, I know I wouldn't need words. The truth between us was never in what we said. It was in what we didn't. And so I keep living, moving forward one day at a time, carrying this part of my story where no one else can touch it. Not out of shame, but out of a strange, bittersweet gratitude. Because for all the wrong it might have been, it reminded me of something I had forgotten, that I was still capable of feeling, of wanting, of being wanted in return. One day, when my voice is gone and my body is still, the story will leave with me. It will vanish into the quiet, just as it began. And maybe that's how it was always meant to be. Not a love to be told, but a moment to be kept, like a delicate flame sheltered in the hollow of my hands. It started as comfort. It turned into something I could never name aloud. And in the end, it became the one truth I will carry with me, unseen and unspoken, to my very last breath. 46.